This story deals with the death of freedom of the seas. Now, that's a bit over dramatic. Freedom of the seas is not going away anytime soon, but it is being challenged. And when Hugo Gratis in 1609 wrote Mare Liberum, Free Ocean, the concept was we were going to develop the world's oceans into a common, the blue commons where everyone could share and use them. And there's a lot of debate about whether or not we've ever achieved that entirely. The Houthi are interdicting trade right now. There are allegations that the U.S. interdicts trade all the time by leveling sanctions against Iran and Venezuela and Korea. And so there's a lot of debate whether or not the seas are free. But what we're seeing right now are issues that are really raising the concern about whether or not the seas are not even free, but they're losing what freedom they do have. So this story over at Splash 24/7, condemnation reigns in over Russian strike on Greek bulker in the Black Sea. Had this story the other day about the attack on the Aya, a bulk carrier coming out of Ukraine that was struck by the Russians' AS-4 Kitchen missile fired from a Tu-22 backfire bomber. Is this Red Storm Rising I'm living in now? It's kind of strange. Mike Schiller followed up that story with Russian missile strike on civilian ship in Black Sea escalates. Meanwhile, over in the Red Sea, the eternal flame that is the tanker Soyuz continues to burn since August 21st. August 21st. It is September 13th I'm filming this. August 21st, over 3 weeks, this ship has been burning. There's been a salvage attempt to get it. It failed, and now a new salvage attempt is being taken. However, this has the potential to dump 1 million gallons of crude oil into the Red Sea. Let's not forget, it was the Houthis who not only attacked this vessel, but went on board it twice and detonated explosives on it, thereby causing the disaster that would befall not just them, but all the countries in the Red Sea. Meanwhile, we have issues like this. Oil spill fears mount as Russian tankers reject key Danish pilots. Tankers hauling Russian crude heading through straits between Denmark, Sweden, and Norway, they are rejecting taking pilots on board. In the 3 months through July, 20% of the Shadow Fleet tankers moving Russian oil through the Danish straits declined the help of experts who know the local waters. That proportion has increased from 4% a year earlier. This is one of the narrowest little straits in the world, a very tight passage, sailed through it before heading into the Baltic. Tankers going through there without pilots is a recipe of disaster. And the dark fleet tankers of the hauling Russian crude oil don't have the best track record out there right now. And this seems to be an issue emerging here. At the same time, up in the Arctic, you have 2 Chinese container ships crossing paths in the Arctic waters. This is a pretty dramatic event here as 2 vessels come out. The Flying Fish 1, the first ever Panamax container ship to venture in the Arctic, is traveling from St. Petersburg to Qingdao. The other vessel is the Nunu Star. It's transporting 3,534 TEUs. Now, you should note these are not big container ships. They are also ice-strengthened container ships, so these are not container ships that you could just pull off the world's oceans and do. But this route that you're seeing here is remarkably shorter than the route around Indian Ocean, Red Sea, or around Africa. It has its issues with the fact that you need icebreakers, especially in some of these key areas here where there is a lot of ice density, but is representing a new challenge that the Russians may have with the opening of the Northern Sea route. Then you have the North Korean leader emphasizing the importance of strengthening naval power. Kim Jong-un emphasized the importance of strengthening naval power during a tour of a naval base. Now that we are soon to possess large surface warships and submarines which cannot be anchored by the existing facilities for mooring warships, the construction of a naval base for running the largest large warship has become a pressing task. Understand, we are already seeing the Houthi interdicting shipping. We've seen the Iranians interdict shipping coming out of the Straits of Hormuz. We're seeing the Russians operating a dark fleet. We're seeing the Russians attacking shipping coming out of Ukraine. What if Kim Jong-un, the most level-headed man in the world, decides to start attacking ships in the Sea of Japan and decide to announce that the Sea of Japan is no longer the Sea of Japan, it's now the Sea of Korea, and they exert their dominance, preventing the flow of ships from the Straits of Tsushima up through the Japanese home isles. Now, Not a big deal. Shipping will just divert around Japan out into the Pacific, but it will cost money. It is a longer voyage to do that. It represents risk. And should we allow Korea to exert their dominance over this region? That's the concern you have. At the same time, too, let's not forget what's happening down in the South China Sea. 60 Minutes is running a special on Sunday about the Chinese Navy and Coast Guard versus the Philippine Coast Guard and Navy. Understand, we have an alliance treaty, the United States, with the Philippines. This event down in the South China Sea has the potential to expand. At the same time, China is strengthening its grip on global shipping. Sam Chambers over Splash 24/7 with a great story talking about how China is reactivating closed shipyards. They're combining together shipyards. China's on the brink of building more than half of the world's ocean-going vessels, over 50%. Soon, they're going to eclipse Korea and Japan combined and the rest of the world. That is a significant development. At the same time, you have op-eds like this. Why can't the U.S. build ships? Deals with the issue that the U.S. is just floundering in its ability not just to build commercial vessels, but having problems building naval vessels. You have the U.S. Navy withdrawing forces. This is an article about the aircraft carrier Theodore Roosevelt leaving the Middle East. Understand, the U.S. had two aircraft carriers in the Middle East, the Abraham Lincoln and Theodore Roosevelt. It had an amphibious ready group, the WASP group up in the Mediterranean. Yet when the Eisenhower battle group pulled out, after a lot of press talking about that this is the most combat a U.S. aircraft carrier strike group has ever undertaken since World War II, nobody went back into the Red Sea to stop the Houthi. The Roosevelt didn't, the Lincoln did it. And so what you get are the Houthi and trolls, in my opinion, coming out and saying that they vanquished the Eisenhower, they made the Eisenhower run, the U.S. Navy is too scared. This is policy. This is administration level stuff. This is not the U.S. Navy. If you ask the U.S. Navy to go in and hit the Houthis, they're going to go hit the Houthis. I guarantee you that. They want to hit the Houthis. This is administration issues. They have decided to abrogate U.S. defense in the area, which I talked about from the very beginning. If you try to defend everything, you defend nothing, Sun Tzu. And instead, they have turned this over to the European Union. The European Union doesn't have enough forces to do this, which I kind of raise questions about because part of the European Union's Navy is over in the friggin' Pacific. 2 German Navy ships just sailed through the Taiwan Straits on Friday in an effort to demonstrate the fact that China doesn't control the Taiwan Straits. The Chinese aren't stopping anyone from sailing through the Taiwan Straits. When you do a freedom of navigation exercise through the Taiwan Straits, who are you demonstrating freedom of navigation to? Pisses the Chinese off. It makes you bump your chest like, hey, we sailed through the Taiwan Straits. If the Europeans, who have a ton of ships in the Pacific right now, including an Italian carrier strike group. Never thought I would say that phrase. An Italian carrier strike group is in the Pacific. If the Europeans want to practice freedom of navigation, I've got a place for you to go. It's called the Red Sea, the Gulf of Aden, and the Bab el-Mandab. There's a place you can actually do live fire tests in the region and actually may be able to get war risk insurance down, or at the very least, help escort European Union, US, UK vessels through the region. Set up some convoys and run them through, diminish the war risk costs, and actually open up a maritime choke point and get some ocean shipping going through it. 15% of the world's shipping goes through that area in terms of cargo, and you've diverted at least half, if not 2/3 of it around Africa. 7 to 10% of world trade is being diverted by the Houthi, who are not the recognized government of Yemen. They're recognized by a very small handful of countries, yet they have decided to execute a maritime strategy and are forcing the world ships to divert around the area. Let's be clear, of the ships they have attacked, only a third of them, can be linked back to Israel. They're doing their 6 degrees of separation to Kevin Bacon to try to connect every ship back to Israel. They're contortionists when it comes to this. Well, that ship from that company 5 years ago went into Israel, therefore this ship is liable for attack. Okay, you're stretching that a bit, just to be clear, okay? Everybody knows you're stretching it. You can make the argument all you want, but you're stretching it. You're really kind of silly puttying this whole argument. Yet the US, UK, and European Korean, Japanese, all the major players out there are abrogating this and allowing this to happen. Meanwhile, if you want to ask what's keeping ship owners up at night, Sam Chambers with this fantastic story talking about this issue. What are the issues that ship owners around the world are concerned about? And what you see is this. This is the graph that they put together, Maritime Leaders' Perception of Risk Against Shipping Abilities to Address the Risk in 2024. What's the risk versus the lowest confidence? Political instability. That's what they're worried about. Political instability followed by cyber attacks and malicious physical attacks. That is the Red Sea. That is what we've seen being executed by the Russians and the Chinese. That is the concern that is out there. What are they not really worried about? They have low risk, high confidence, epidemics, pandemics, industry reputation, extreme weather events. They can handle that. They know how to handle that. Everything else, supply chain instability, financial instability, administrative burdens, regulation, barriers to trade, they're medium risk, but they are figuring out how to handle them, but they don't have quite as much confidence in how to handle them. And I think that's a telling demonstration. What is the thing they worry about more than anything else? Geopolitical instability, cyber attacks, and physical attacks on their vessels. That's it. And you know who's supposed to provide that defense? Nations and navies. However, before you shipping companies think you get off scot-free with this, you have decided to basically incorporate offshore. You have decided to flag your vessels in nations without navies. Listen, if you flag yourself in the Cayman Islands, the Cayman Island Navy, which I think is a rowboat of some kind, is not coming to get you. Understand that there is this issue now where we have to kind of rethink how we're doing ocean shipping. The idea of the free sea versus the closed sea is no longer, I think, applicable. We need a new thought, because the idea of what flag you fly off the back of the ship may not be the one that is important anymore. It may not be just who owns the ship anymore, because trying to figure out who owns a friggin' ship is nearly impossible. Ask the Houthi, because they get it wrong on a consistent basis, because it's not clear. The other issue you have is, well, then do you protect the trade? What cargo is on the ship? Because if you're protecting the cargo, that's a whole different issue, because a 12,000 box container ship, that's cargo from everybody around the world. And the real big question is, what do we do then to do this? Do we need to create a world tax to fund a world navy? I'm not advocating that. That's not Sal's suggestion. Don't delete that from this video. That's a terrible idea. We need to rethink how we do things. And some nations, I will say, are starting to think about that. Of all places, Australia. My hat's off to the Australians. Australia seeks commercial vessels for strategic fleet. The Australian government has announced a tender for vessels to participate in the Strategic Fleet Pilot Program, a 5-year initiative aimed at strengthening the nation's maritime capabilities and resilience. 3 private vessels operated commercially but available to the government for requisition in national emergency, according to the Honorable Catherine King, Minister for Infrastructure, Transport, Regional Development, and Local Government. Can I just say, great title. I like that title a lot. I wish we had Minister for Infrastructure, Transport, Regional Development, and Local Government. She said this is a major step toward fulfilling our commitment to establish a strategic fleet of up to 12 Australian flagged and crew vessels to strengthen our sovereign maritime capability while supporting a maritime workforce. Listen, you can go for the foreign flag, foreign owned, foreign registered vessel all you want, but understand the world seas are not as free as we thought they were. They're coming under more and more threats and attacks than ever. Governments, navies, militaries, politicians, you name it, need to protect them in a way that we haven't been used to. We're used to the open seas. We're used to being able to load our goods on a Filipino-manned Panamanian flag vessel, and it's going to come across the ocean with no problem, and it's going to be dirt cheap. And we love every minute of that because we can buy the goods without a lot of transportation costs. That may not be the case, which means transportation costs are going to go up, which means inflation is going to go up, which means we may see reshoring of some manufacturing or nearshoring in some ways. We may be coming on a new age of ocean trade routes. Philip Parker's book back here, Trade Routes, one of my favorites, talks about all sorts of trade routes, both on land and at sea. We may be at one of those inflection points coming ahead here. Maybe we need to be thinking about new ways to do things, new missions for navies and coast guards out there. What roles should they be playing? Should we require ships to be registered in countries that can provide defense for them? Maybe the International Maritime Organization should get off their ass in Geneva and actually start passing some laws and rules and regulations that actually do something to help defend vessels and the mariners on them. I don't know. Crazy idea, but that's what I am thinking. That's a lot to process. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you did, hey, take a moment, subscribe to the channel, and hit the bell so be alerted about new videos as they come out. Leave a comment, share it across social media, and if you can, support the page. And I appreciate all the support I get to the page. How do you support the page? Well, you can hit that super thanks button down below, or head on over to Patreon and become a monthly, yearly subscriber. Until our next episode, and hopefully, Freedom of the Seas still exists. This is Sal, signing off.